Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. I'm your host, Greg Moffitt, and today I'd like to present the latest episode in my TV and movie review series, Hauntology Dystopia. Now, today, I'm not going to be looking at two items in the manner that I normally do. There's simply one today. One film, very much about two actors in the film. You can see from the title of the video, is The Hard Way from 1980. Let's see if we can get a clear image of that. This stars, you can see the stars on the cover, Patrick McGoohan and Lee Van Cleef. Now, most of you probably haven't even heard of this movie, never mind seen it. But when I'm finished, I hope that you'll very much want to check it out. So, as mentioned, this from 1980, a made-for-TV film, so it wasn't shown in cinemas at the time. I stumbled upon this, as happened fortuitously with so many things in the past, just on late-night TV. I'm zoning out, I don't know, channel surfing, just trying to find something. And I stumbled upon something I didn't know. It just happened to be at the start of the film, of The Hard Way, but I didn't know this at the time. But I stumbled upon an interesting sequence that reminded me of something from the Sweeney or the Professionals, maybe. It was set in a sort of a industrial sort of wasteland type area, maybe like a docklands thing, derelict buildings and whatnot. And it had a real 70s vibe to it, which turned out to be exactly right. And so I stayed with it. And it turned out it was the sequence we were watching was a hitman setting up in his sort of eagle's nest, as it were, to assassinate someone. Then, when the hitman started to assemble his gun, I think, wow, it's Patrick McGoohan in something I've never seen before. I've been a massive fan of McGoohan most of my life since discovering The Prisoner on TV repeats in the 1980s. So I thought, well, it's Patrick McGoohan in something I haven't seen. I'm going to stick with it. And as I say, that sequence of him setting up for the kill and executing it turned out to be right at the start of the film. In The Hard Way, McGoohan plays a character. His name's John Connor, and is a professional hitman. And his handler, as it were, the intermediary between McGoohan and the sort of clients who pay for his services is Lee Van Cleef's character, McNeil. Now, as mentioned, I'd seen McGoohan in The Prisoner, but he was also a very successful TV star in his own right in the 60s in a series called Danger Man. Again, I managed to catch some of that later in TV repeats. If you like anything McGoohan's done on The Prisoner, if you're looking for a great spy series with like a real cerebral edge to it, check out Danger Man. And also, I'm mentioning a little bit about McGoohan's wider career and also that of Lee Van Cleef, because they're guys that have just featured in very significant ways in movies and TV that have really influenced me in all sorts of ways, not just in terms of pop culture. McGoohan, for example, is in one of my favorite films, Scanners, from 1981, directed by David Cronenberg. He plays Dr. Paul Ruth in that, a rather somewhat sympathetic character who's kind of part of the scientific corporate establishment, but also has, well, see the film. If you haven't seen Scanners already, see it. And Lee Van Cleef, of course, many of you will know him from his Western appearances. I mean, in countless Westerns, but a lot of other things as well. But you look at his filmography, it's huge. He first came into my life as Angel Eyes in Sergio Leone's so-called Dollars trilogy, Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But of course, Van Cleef is not in the first film, Fistful of Dollars, but he turns up in the subsequent two. And those films were, again, a huge influence on me. They stayed with me all my life. They're what really turned me on to Westerns in a way that a lot of the output before that hadn't. So for me, Leone's stylized so-called spaghetti Western really opened up new vistas literally and figuratively for me, and really got me into the genre. And Lee Van Cleef is in another one of my absolute favorite films, hugely influential on me, Escape from New York, directed by John Carpenter. So John Carpenter and David Cronenberg, two of my favorite directors, and Escape from New York, also from 1981. What a year for cinema. In Escape from New York, Lee Van Cleef plays Bob Hawke against Kurt Russell's Snake Plissken. If you haven't seen that, then again, it's essential viewing. Lee Van Cleef turned up in, I mean, both these guys, I suppose, were moving very much into the autumn, if not the twilight of their careers, when The Hard Way was produced. Lee Van Cleef turned up in other films that I suppose at the end of his career were seen as maybe beneath him or beneath his talents. I'm thinking of films like Wild Geese, now from 1984. Codename Wild Geese, I think it is. Yeah, because there's another Wild Geese. Nothing to do with each other. And a film called Octagon that Lee Van Cleef was in, playing against Chuck Norris of all people. And the thing about these appearing in these movies, it was somebody like Lee Van Cleef or Patrick McGoohan, they, no matter what the material was like, they elevated the films. They brought something to the screen. So every time I see Van Cleef on screen, he just lights it up, as does Patrick McGoohan. So having two of them in one film, in The Hard Way, it was just like, what could go wrong? You know what I mean? And for all its flaws and unfulfilled potential, The Hard Way is a brilliant cinematic experience. Excuse me. So what some of the characters they played represent for me is something that is, if not fast dying out, certainly in steep decline, and that's rugged individualism. You know, something that we will need more than ever in the so-called real world going forward with all the problems that we face as a species. But fiercely discouraged now, militated against the idea of a lone individual taking responsibility for themselves and be able to make their own way. No man is an island. I've said that before in this series, but as far as possible, self-sufficient inwardly and outwardly. So let's talk a little bit more about The Hard Way itself. So directed by Michael Dryhurst and produced by John Boorman. Now, Dryhurst, a name that many of you probably won't know, is not a huge light on the cinematic scene, but John Boorman, by contrast, very much a luminary in cinema, especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So Boorman, for example, director of Zardoz, which I have covered in this series. Point Blank, prior to Zardoz, Point Blank is an amazing action thriller directed by Boorman. Again, see that if you haven't. I mean, all these films I'm mentioning should be like on your watch list. And also Deliverance, John Boorman directed Deliverance. Again, an incredible movie for all sorts of reasons. But say Boorman is on here as producer. One thing that is very much one of the characters in the film, The Hard Way, is the landscape. It's set in Britain and in Ireland. Our titular gunman is McGoohan. He's an Irish American himself, but is based in Ireland, travels across to the mainland and other locations as well, but the mainland Britain to carry out his work. And so the landscape really becomes part of the fabric, I say, character in itself. And we saw this in some other Boorman's films, notably in Excalibur, again from 1981, and in Zardoz. Again, it's incredible how the landscape becomes part of the, really integral to the film experience. Deliverance itself, of course, and that's set in the US, the landscape is probably more than in any of his films. The landscape comes alive, and beauty and danger, I think, are two things that come out from the landscape in Deliverance. Now, The Hard Way is really a film of its time. In fact, I suppose being made in '79, coming out in 1980, it's almost like the end of an era. The film, I say, made for TV, was never really came to anything in terms of success, but it's in the spirit of the pared down, minimalist, stark European thriller of the 60s and 70s. And there are other films that I love that I would mention in the same breath, that I might, if I was curating a little season at a cinema, that these some films I might put together in a playlist. Other ones being Get Carter, the very famous film in 1971, starring Michael Caine. The Mechanic from 1972, starring Charles Bronson, again as a hitman. The Driver from 1978. Thief from 1981, starring James Caan, film directed by Michael Mann of Heat fame. So all those four films, I feel, are in the same. The Hard Way is in the same category in terms of its look, its feel, its pared down minimalism, its advancing of this rugged individualism of the loner, the tales of hard men, basically, again, which is an increasingly endangered species. Now, what the hard Way hinges around is John Connor, McGoohan's character, is trying to get out of this business. He wants to stop doing what he's doing and just retire and lead the quiet life as much as any professional hitman can. He's trying to get out. I'm done with this. McGoohan does I'm done with this pretty much better than any other actor I've ever seen. But you see this in the other films I mentioned, particularly in Thief and The Mechanic. These characters, they want out, James Caan says in Thief to this girl that he meets that he thinks he sees a potential for a relationship with, despite the life he's had before. He wants to leave that behind him. And he says, I am out of time. I am out of time. As a middle-aged guy, led a lifestyle with no future. It can really only end in one way, usually, as you see it, and they're trying to reinvent themselves and just put everything, their past behind them. And often as not, it proves to be impossible. And if you watch The Hard Way, you'll find out how John Connor gets on. I mentioned the opening sequence that I stumbled upon late night TV. It really sets the scene, the atmosphere. I say it's gritty, pared down, a lot in common with Lee Van Cleef's westerns, with Clint Eastwood and Sergio Leone. Minimal dialogue, rugged individualism, hard men, and that's what you get. The films look amazing. The landscape, the natural environment is a character. The music in The Hard Way is also very minimalistic, but incredibly effective. A couple of the main recurring themes are actually drawn from Brian Eno's album Music for Films, and exactly the sort of movie music I like. And it's no coincidence I'm a Brian Eno fan as well. So in the early stages of The Hard Way, after the assassination that takes place in, let's say, London, wherever it happens to be on the mainland, that we see Connor traveling back to Ireland on the ferry. And the whole sequence is incredibly hauntological. I remember the feeling I had when I first watched it, because of all these things that, some of which still exist, but things are done differently now. So we see him getting a train from London, Euston, I think, to across land to the ferry terminal. If he's going to the Republic of Ireland, it was probably in Wales that he was going to get the ferry. Might have been Liverpool, probably Wales. He's on the train, and while he's on there, he's writing a check to someone, turns out to be for his estranged wife. And then we see him arriving in Ireland, and the whole thing is just incredibly evocative of a time past and ways of doing things that are lost, really, for better or worse. As I say, the Czech turns out to be his estranged wife, but of course, not very many professional hitmen can sustain a home life or a family life. The estranged wife is played by Edna O'Brien. She's a celebrated Irish playwright and author, amongst other things. Recently passed away, incidentally. And her role is mostly, and we never really see them together, her role is in cutaways in the film, kind of explaining the background to her life with John and just her thoughts on his life and what happened to them. And there's quite a troubled production of this film, and I get the feeling that these cutaways might have been added as a way of plugging gaps in the narrative. But it's a little bit like a Greek chorus that you get in stage plays. So the little explanatory bit of exposition that, what you just saw, this is what happened, or what you just saw, this is what led up to it, and blah, 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 etc. So McNeil, Lee Van Cleef's character, McGoohan, John Connor's handler, does not want to accept his retirement, and he's got at least one more job for him. And he travels to Ireland, he follows him there, tracks him down, and tries to strong arm him into doing the job. There's a standoff, a bit of confrontation, not violent, but it's in a pub. And John Connor basically says, yeah, I don't owe you anything, I'm not doing it, leaves. Subsequently, Connors is threatened. Basically, some heavies turn up, and it's basically made clear to him that his wife and daughter are at risk. We wouldn't want anything to happen to them now, would we? Do the job. So he reluctantly agrees to do this, and it's then that we get into the murky world of political intrigue. The secret unknowns, as referred to by Vincent Corleone in The Godfather 3. You think you've got to the top in politics and economics and all of that murk, and then you realize it's the middle, and above that, the secret unknowns. We don't know who they are. We only, a bit like dark energy and dark matter, we only infer their existence because of their effect on other things that we can see. And his job is to travel to Paris to assassinate a priest. Again, that's interesting. That's got sort of a resonance with Godfather 3 once again. Another underrated film, actually. A lot of people, Godfather 2, they're all about that. Godfather Part 3, I think there's a lot going for it. So Connor does everything, goes through the motions to prepare for this mission, but at the last minute, he's no intention of carrying it out. So at the last minute, he aborts the mission and then has to deal with all the fallout and the implications of that, because you don't double cross the secret unknowns without fallout comeback. So then McNeil dispatches, Connor returns to Ireland, and McNeil dispatches people to, men in black to go and take him out. He takes them out, and then there's a final confrontation in a bit like in, I think is it Skyfall, the Bond movie, Daniel Craig. There's a final confrontation in a booby-trapped mansion, and again, you watch the hard way to find out how that pans out. So basically, in terms of what this is, you're looking at, many people what I've described as sounding like sort of a gangster film, but it's more than that. It's beyond that, because it isn't just mafia. You saw, say, in The Godfather Part 3, how you had the whole mafia, that layer of the underworld and crime and political influence. They're very powerful, but there's something above that that they cannot enter into. So in the hard way, this is a gritty crime drama. It's not some tawdry gangland film. It really isn't. So, and this is one of the reasons why Connor found it so hard to get out of it, because it's like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. The hauntological aspects, I say, are powerful in this, partly because of the time it's set in, partly because of the way people are and the way they do things. Any historical drama is increasingly becoming hauntological by default for those sorts of reasons. And again, the minimalism of it all, and Brian Eno's music, and yeah, just it's a very, very powerful package. So, and there's a quite poignant moment really when John Connor's wife in one of the cutaways is talking about him, and she's talking about how he handles his guns and how gentle he is with them. And she said that he could almost have been a priest. You know, there was something spiritual, religious, devotional about the way he went about it. And that's probably what made him top man in his field, killing, why he was in demand and why they didn't want to let him go. And she's obviously, the whole thing's very bittersweet. She's obviously over this guy and just has got, she even says that she never, you know, she didn't cash these checks. Therefore, you know, the children, she never took a penny of it, the money that he kept sending to her. And she says towards the end that John's life was a waste of a man. So there was obviously something he could have been, whether a priest or whatever, something else, even just a father, you know. But he chose something else for reasons unclear. We don't really know how he ever got into what he does. And that's about that. So The Hard Way, just to remind us once again, 1980, Patrick McGoohan, Lee Van Cleef, a film I say that I stumbled upon and that I've never forgotten. It stayed with me ever since. This edition you're looking at here, I think it's the only one. I have seen other DVD covers, but this is the only one I've ever physically seen, and I bought this many years ago. This was put out by Network in 2009. Now, Network, as some of you might have heard on the grapevine, recently went out of business. So who knows what's going to happen to all the movies that they licensed. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, buy physical media, buy and own physical media. A time is coming when the cloud, you know, virtual storage, streaming, all of that shit is going away. This might not last forever. There may be a time may come when we've got DVDs and no DVD players, or in future, we don't know what these things are, and people just hang them up on their allotments to scare the birds away. But hopefully that's some time off. So that's it for today. Until next time, I'm Greg Moffitt, and you've been watching LegalizeFreedom.com.
LegalizeFreedom.com